Want to buy a small multifamily unit? I've got some tips for you. We will be diving in on how to buy your first multifamily property as a first time home buyer. I'll be guiding you through the entire process from choosing an agent all the way to close. And with that, I also have a small bonus tip at the end of this, so stay tuned for that. Let's dive right in. First things first, let's talk about your quarterback of your real estate investing journey, your agent. Now, why is it a good idea to have a agent in your corner? It's so that they can help navigate you through the complexities of a small multifamily transaction, from the deal analysis to the lenders. They can help you with a variety of different resources so that way you can be successful. It's a good idea to ask your agent questions, some of which should be: what's your experience with investors or house hackers? Do you offer any education on how to analyze deals? What is a good deal in this market? Are you an investor yourself? Who do you have in your network that would be helpful for me? These are fantastic questions to start off the conversation so that way you have a better understanding of what the agent's experience has been. It's very helpful when you have an agent who has dealt with property management issues and knows the resources to use in order to make sure that things get fixed, or also the contractor contacts. That way, if something does go wrong in your property, then you know who to turn to give you some additional resources to reach out with. So these are great questions to ask, and it also helps when they know how to run the numbers and better understand what the market is, because the small multifamily unit or investor section of the market is a completely different beast than residential, because you're looking at a lot of different other factors that you may not be seeing on a residential sale. I am Will, and I create educational content around the home buying, selling, and investing side of real estate, and also about living here in Portland, Oregon. If you are looking to move to this area or look at house hacking yourself, feel free to reach out. I'll have my contact details down below. Let's continue with the next steps. First off, it's a good idea to understand what market you're in and whether or not one is going to be an option at all. For those metro markets, let's say if we're on the West Coast or East Coast, a lot of times you more have the ability to improve the equity side of this equation. However, the cash flow might not be there. If you're looking more in the Midwest, where houses are a little bit more affordable, then you will probably have options where you can buy a house and have a little bit more of the cash flow side, but maybe not as much on the equity side. So just know that there is a little bit of a trade-off when it comes to these different markets and also where you personally want to live. Now, if you are looking to buy a small multifamily and live in that, there are great options for owner-occupied loans that go down as low as 3.5% with FHA. And there's actually a couple other lenders in the area that have fantastic programs that allow you to put a little bit lower down on those. But just note, when you are putting less down, then it makes it a lot harder for the cash flow portion of this investment to happen. Just know that you're leveraging against a huge portion of that, especially if you're looking in a metro area. So keep that in mind when you're running numbers to stay a little bit more realistic. This kind of gets us into another point, which is align your expectations with reality. When you're talking with your agent, it's a good idea to better understand what is a good return on investment or your cap rate or whatever that might be for that market, and know that that might be different for different people. For example, if you are looking to buy a duplex, you're probably going to have a different cap rate, and depending on the area, than something that has maybe a 4 unit that has less bedrooms or whatnot. So keep in mind that when you are investing in real estate, it depends on how comfortable you want to be and whether or not you're in the house in general. So when you're looking at the deal analysis, that you're able to better understand whether or not this is a good or a bad deal. Now, how do you plan to finance this small multifamily purchase? An option you have is going to be portfolio loans. These are loans that the bank uses for themselves and they don't sell off to another lender. That allows them to have a little bit more flexibility with the terms and the interest rate. So keep those in mind, and they tend to be a little bit more local or specific to a bank. So that's when you connect to a real estate agent and they will have a better understanding of what potential loan programs you can use. Another common option is going to be the FHA and VA loans. These are loans that you can use across the US and allow you to put as little as 3.5% down in order to purchase up to a 4-unit building. One caveat that I want to add to this is that when you are looking at FHA and VA loans, they will have to face the sustainability rule once you hit those 3 to 4 units. So with the 3 to 4 units, the rent from those units need to cover 75% of the total PITI, or the mortgage payment, which is the principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. Just note that in major markets like Portland, that tends to fall apart a little bit. So just keep that in mind when you are running numbers. Now that you have gotten your agent, you've gotten a lender, you can now start analyzing a little bit more deals. Now, when it comes to analyzing deals, it's a good idea to have a deal calculator. This way you can better understand what the costs are or what the potential rents are. And that is something that I personally help out with because I have a deal calculator that I created that's a little bit on the extreme side. However, it gives you a great picture of looking at that 20 to 30 year time frame of holding a rental property. Now, something to note is that you are the one who is responsible for doing your own due diligence. A real estate agent or your lender will help you out with understanding the finances, but it's up to you to determine what your risk levels are and also understand what is a good deal or what's not a good deal, or frankly a good fit for you lifestyle wise when it comes to buying a small multifamily. If you are looking to fix up a ton for yourself and you have the budget for that, then that's something that you should definitely be looking at. If you are not quite as handy, then that might not be as great of an option, and you might have a lower return on investment. However, this might be a good benefit for you over the lifespan of the property that you own. Now, for the reality of the search, it could potentially take you a couple years to find the right property for you. However, it could also be the next weekend. You just don't really know what properties will come up, and it's a good idea to be on your A game or better understand how to analyze deals. That way, when the property does come up, you know what to do. And if you ever have questions about analyzing properties or things of that nature, if you were working with me, that's where I try to give as much feedback as possible. So that way you can better understand how to best utilize a property or figure out what will make it work for you. Ready to be a landlord? Let's dive into a couple things that you want to consider so that way you are not breaking the law. When you are looking at the different places when it comes to landlord tenant law, the 3 places you should be looking for is at the state level, the county level, and then at the city level. Note that they may be a little bit more different or a little bit more lax or a little bit more controlling depending on where you're at. And it's a good idea to talk to your agent about what those pros and cons are, and then also consider and understand what those landlords tenant laws will do to impact the purchase of the home. You don't have to be an expert immediately, but it's a good idea to start this education early so that way when you do become the landlord, you have a better understanding of what to do. Another thing to consider for the education is going to be landlord associations. There's typically going to be 1 or 2 in your local market that will have forms along with great educational content to better prepare you to be a landlord, and it's a good thing to consider. Now that you have found the small multifamily property for you, let's dive into what you need to do to make an offer and what that process looks like. So sometimes you may not even be able to see the property before you even make an offer. So one thing to note is that a lot of times landlords or the sellers don't want to bother their tenants a ton. So what happens is that you may have to make an offer subject to interior inspection. So once you make that offer is then accepted. You can then have a time period where it's usually about 48 to 72 hours to then go see the interior side of that property. None of the timelines really start until you say, okay, let's move forward. Because if you walk into a property and it is a ton of work that you don't have the time for or the money for, then that's something where you can then retract the offer. Now, when we're making the offer, some things to consider is that we're going to be looking at the price, and then we're also going to be looking at the terms. So when it comes to a price, this is something where if you are coming with a lower amount down, sometimes if you need to cover closing costs, that's where we can raise the offer price and then have the purchase price covered. So that way the net that is going to the seller or the total funds at the end of everything is higher or equal to what they are looking for. And when it comes to other terms that they may be looking for, we can also potentially release earnest money once the inspection period has ended. So that way we can give the tenants a 90-day notice. The reason for this is so that way when we do end inspection periods, they then have some sort of money if they give that 90-day notice, that if, let's say, the transaction doesn't work out at all, they have something to go off of that. So these are just a few terms to be really considering, and also understanding price. That's where, when you are talking to an agent, know that there might be other opportunities for you to negotiate later down the line, especially when you start diving into the inspection period. Once your offer is accepted and you do the walkthrough, if need be, after the 48 to 72 hours, you are then going to be starting all of these timelines. One of the major timelines to be considering is the inspection period. Let's dive into the inspection period and what that entails for your house hack. First, you'll get a inspector in there so that way they can inspect the house and better understand what this might look like for you in terms of potential repairs. And just note that typically this is going to be a little bit higher because you are asking someone to not inspect just one house, but multiple houses. So keep that in mind when you are looking to do inspections. Now, think of the inspector as a primary care physician. If there's anything that needs specialty work or needs a little bit more diving into, that's where you will then get referred to a specialist, which would be, for example, a roofing specialist. If, let's say, that the roof is at the end of its lifespan, or looking at any structural things, that's when you would get a structural engineer. So note that these might be additional costs, especially if you're looking at getting professionals into this as well. When it comes to looking at electricians and plumbers, tend to have a fee associated with them, especially when it comes to engineers. However, some contractors may not have that fee for getting an estimate. And this is where having a great agent who has those contractor contacts makes a huge difference and can speed along your inspection process. A bonus note for this as well is one of the techniques you can use if, let's say, that the seller doesn't have enough money to get this fixed or get something fixed within the time frame to close, then you can always do an escrow holdback. Now, there are some caveats with this, and you'll have to make sure to check with your escrow office about what is possible and what's not possible, but this would be a great option for you if the seller doesn't have enough funds to make it work right now. While you have been getting the inspection going, you are also going to be looking at the financials of this property again in more than one way. One of those ways is going to be looking at the rent rolls and see kind of the general costs that have been going on with the house, and see whether or not the rents are what they were listed on the property. Just note that this is a good time to do your due diligence, and this is going to be up to you to dive into this further and ask your agent as many questions as possible, because this is going to be a critical part during the transaction where you are doing a lot of heavy lifting and doing a lot of paperwork. Now, you are going to want to crunch those numbers again when it comes to your house hack. Another thing you're going to want to be considering and better understanding is what kind of maintenance costs you may need to incur, or better understand what that might be. Note that you may not be able to get everything, but you should be able to get a general gist of how much lawn service might be, or these other things that need to be ongoing. And if you are handy, that might be something that you should be considering on understanding, like, okay, I need to carve out this much time to do this during the fall or winter or spring or whatever that might be. So there is a lot of additional analysis where you should be recrunching those numbers and better understanding how accurate they are and how not accurate they are, and diving further into the comps for the rentals in that area and seeing what the actual amount you could potentially raise those rents by, or make it so that way you are creating a better income producing property. Note that this will be an ongoing thing that you'll probably want to do throughout the transaction. However, this big push initially during the inspection period is going to be critical for you, so that way you can better understand whether or not this is a good deal and continue, or to walk away. Let's talk about the possession process when it comes to your house hack or small multifamily property. Just note that the possession process varies from state to state and city to city, so it's a good idea to remember about those landlord-tenant laws and better understand how that will impact your move-in. Here in Portland, Oregon, sometimes that can be up to about 90 days. So even though you may close and then they are given that 90-day notice right after the inspection period ends, you may have to wait a little while in order to then get into that property and make sure that the property is vacated. So keep that in mind when you are looking at taking possession, and understand that there might be a couple caveats to that depending on where you're at. When you do take possession of the property, it's a good idea to introduce yourself to the tenants or have a property management company introduce themselves, so that way you have the system set up. When the tenant needs to pay, they understand where that is, and then if there's any maintenance issues, they also understand where that is as well. These are good things to do, so that way you are prepared when taking possession of the property. Now, once you've done this, you have successfully navigated through the home buying process of a small multifamily, and maybe you're diving into this house hack for the first time, and that is a huge achievement. You have probably done something that not a lot of other people have done, and will be a great step for you to build wealth for your future. Now, if you are curious about buying a small multifamily property or a house hack of some sort in the Portland metro area, feel free to reach out. I also have a ton of investors, agents that are around the US as well that could potentially help you too. So if you want me to connect you with them, I'd be more than happy to. Otherwise, if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out. I would love to help out. And thanks so much for watching.